Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Brief. This week, I have a special bonus episode for you. I'm excited to introduce you to one of my colleagues, somebody I work with in the movement, Skylar Zander, who's all the way down in Florida with Americans for Prosperity. We're going to talk about their legislative priorities, what this group does to achieve policy wins in the real world, and how you can get involved. So let's jump in. So Skylar, you and I have actually never had the pleasure of meeting, to my recollection, but I've been following your work and AFP Florida's work for many, many years. Tell us how you came to run the Florida chapter of AFP.
Well, Hannah, it's great to be with you. And I'll tell you, I wish I got more time out spending time with great individuals like yourself. But man, I've got two little kiddos that, boy, they keep me busy every single day. So I'm very blessed, but at the same time, don't get to go out like I used to. But look, I came to AFP 8 years ago, started out my career working in the Florida House. Then I did private education lobbying, where I focused on lobbying for private education entities in front of the state legislature. And I just decided, hey, I want to do more. I want to do more than just focus on education in particular. And man, AFP agrees with what I agree with across the spectrum as far as issues wise. And so I was like, I got to join this group. And so fortunately, they brought me in. Chris Hudson hired me. He's now our vice president of government affairs. And I've been here ever since.
Well, I've got to tell you, AFP has been on my radar almost from the very beginning. When I got involved with politics, I was working in Nashville's music industry and sort of figuring out that I was a libertarian and starting to get involved more in the local political scene. And AFP was probably the first group I encountered where I was like, oh, these people line up almost exactly with my beliefs, like totally consistent on free markets and on limited government, on individual liberty. And on top of all of that, I remember thinking this group actually gets stuff done, right? I was starting to kind of feel around and figuring out the dirty secret of the political movement, which is there are a lot of people existing in this movement that are totally fine to collect a paycheck and not really get anything done at the end of the day. And I am not one of those people, and AFP certainly doesn't have those kinds of people. You guys really are so impactful. Can you talk to people who've never encountered AFP about what the structural organization looks like? What are you guys doing behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we really appreciate that. I mean, we try to pride ourselves on getting things accomplished, right? At the end of the day, if we're not getting things accomplished, then, what are we here for? Are we just running around in circles and burning donor resources? That's not what we're about. We're about results. We're about making sure that there's key outcomes for all Americans and specifically for all Floridians in my case. And so, like you said earlier, we've got a 50-state strategy, but we're really focused on 36 key states across the country right now. And, everybody prioritizes different issues. Each state comes up with their own strategy as to what are the top issues that state needs to accomplish to see the most freedom. And so we focus on those key pieces. And then we drive that transformational change in the best way that we possibly can. The great thing about AFP too, what I love is, people don't know what to do with this sometimes. We're really a true libertarian, center right leaning organization. And so it's funny when you have those on the far right who are coming in saying, come on, we got to get Republicans elected. We got to help Republicans. It's all about the party. We're all in this together. But that's not us. That's not who we are. We're focused on our key principles, and we're going to tell you how we feel, regardless of where you're at on the issue. And we're going to hope to work with you on something else.
Yeah, I love that. You guys are really good about building bridges and in my experience, have wide respect on both the left and the right. So I want to dig into Florida's agenda this year. It's very ambitious, which we love to see it. It's awesome. You've got so many good things you're working on. I've been very privileged to get to be a part of some of them. Let's kick off with the one my audience probably is most familiar about. I've been talking about this for a few months now, but you guys are on the precipice of passing what would be the nation's largest school choice program.
We can't wait. It's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. I feel it in my bones. We've been working on it for years, trying to lay the groundwork to get there. Florida really started on the education choice movement in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Governor Bush started bringing in this idea of let's change the institution that is education and really challenging what the status quo was. And then fast forward to where we're at today, and we've seen this just drastic transformation of educational options. When you look at polling across the country in different states, choice polls so well in Florida because it's part of our culture. It's not just, going into a new state like Iowa, who had some troubles this year because of the fact that, it's just not been entrenched in their culture. But they got it done too. But here in Florida, it's part of our culture and it polls so well across the board. And I just think what's going to make it even better is to provide this for all of Florida students, not just the low income individuals. It's not fair to say that one kid is different than the other. It's not fair to say that just because you pay taxes, we're not going to pay your school tuition if you're going to go to a private school option. And so we are at the precipice of really expanding it to, all of Florida students, 2.8 million of students here in Florida. And I'm really excited about it.
And this is a big get. I don't think people understand just how much the picture has changed when it comes to school choice. I started working on these issues in Tennessee in 2016. And let me tell you, it was an uphill battle, even on the right back then, to try to move anything school choice related. You very rarely saw anything other than very minor bills that were even being attempted, where you'd have, just for low income students or just for kids with special needs, you could get school choice. You guys are about to get universal school choice. That means every kid in the state could access this. That is a political win that would have been infeasible pre-pandemic, I would say. What factors do you think you guys got right to line things up to where you're sitting so pretty right now? You've got the Speaker of the House that is supportive of this. You've got really great co-sponsors on the bill. It's got a very smooth pathway. And like you said, you've moved the culture on this, right? To where the grassroots really want this. But what did that take behind the scenes to get to?
Man, it took moms and dads. It took students really raising their voices and their concerns, saying, please give us this option. Please give us this opportunity. Every year, Florida's had a voucher system since the early 2000s, but every year, those programs had waiting lists, proving that the demand has been there consistently. Not only that, but like you said, the pandemic really accelerated and made parents realize, oh my goodness, what are my children learning? Wow, I really need to get them different options and opportunities. And I want them to learn key values of society that I want to instill in them. And so no matter what that is, you should have the opportunity and option to take the dollars that you're paying into an institution to go and have your child learn in a way that you think fits their needs. And that resonated incredibly well with members. And then we had a Speaker of the House who's laid out this bold agenda. I mean, we couldn't do this without Paul Renner. Paul Renner is an incredible speaker. He's come out being bold. People have wanted to pull him back, saying, no, we don't need to go universal. We can do it by just continuing to do low and middle income. But why? Why are we going to treat kids differently? And so, he's swinging for the fences, and I think we're going to get it done. But again, it's those parents having those conversations every single day with local members of the legislature that really accelerated this.
Well, it's really exciting to see. And I think you're right. I think you are going to get it. And this will be, as we mentioned, the nation's largest school choice program in existence. Arizona as the first that passed universal school choice, I think last year, but the numbers are nowhere close to what this would do in Florida. So definitely keep watching that, guys. And I think, in my opinion, Florida has become the bellwether state for the rest of the country, certainly for the rest of the red states. So when you see Florida do something like this, it seems pretty impossible that there would not be a domino effect that other states would then start to follow the lead of Florida. So I think that this should excite people who don't live in the Sunshine State as well. Now, there's another school choice type bill that you're working on. This one's called Learn Everywhere and Transfer of Academic Credit. It's known as HB 333, Senate Bill 1120, if you want to look it up. I'm not familiar with this one. So can you give me the crash course on this?
Absolutely. So we believe that, there's opportunities for kids to learn outside of the traditional classroom, that may be a credit or two, depending on what you want to do. So if you want to take an intern or take a course at a local history museum, our belief is you're learning history. So why shouldn't that count towards your history credit in school by somebody who's probably a doctorate in that field, or at least a master's degree in that field, who are really trying to make sure that you understand, have the passion for the history, especially if it's on a specific time period, or a specific culture. They're going to be able to do that better than, a teacher who's trying to teach 25 different students at one time and, is reading basically the curriculum that's dictated to them. So we want them to be able to take that time that they've served, spending time at a museum or something like that, and allow that to be converted into a credit that the state will then recognize. And we call it learning everywhere.
Yeah, I love that. I was homeschooled. So that's how we grew up learning. We had textbooks that we used, we had workshops that we did, but a lot of my education was my mom booking us to go tour a factory and see how something got made, or going to shadow somebody in their job and understanding, how they went about their profession. And you really do learn, I think, so much better in those kinds of environments because it's more hands-on. You get to sort of touch and feel and interact with things. It's a much richer way of learning than just sitting at a desk and having things explained to you. So I love to see this. That's exciting. These are the kinds of things that people like you are working on behind the scenes that I think would just really energize Americans. And people are so busy, they don't always know that this kind of thing is up for grabs. And I love to see this kind of innovative thinking. So that's very cool. We'll definitely be following that. Another issue that you're working on that I'm a huge proponent of is a bill that would basically extend universal recognition of occupational licenses. Now, occupational licensing is like a pet project for us in the liberty movement, right? We're all very up to speed on it, care a lot about it, and I think kind of nerd out over it a bit. The average person, I don't think, knows what an occupational license is unless they've had to obtain one. But this is a huge problem in our economy. Give us the lowdown on just how much this is holding us back.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to get an occupational license today to be able to go work in a profession, it could take you 800 hours if you want to become a cosmetologist. That's longer than it takes you to be a CNA. And by the way, a CNA is putting a catheter inside of you. I mean, come on, like, you tell me what is more of a public risk, either somebody cutting a hair or somebody putting a catheter in you. I think it's a no-brainer. On top of that, there's no difference in cutting my hair here in Florida or cutting my hair in Oregon or New York or any of these other states. Hair is hair. It's not changing. And so from our perspective, if you move here from Oregon or another state, you should be able to be licensed to go into the field right away. I mean, you've done it for years. Maybe you only did it for a year. Either way, you should be able to come into the state of Florida, practice right away, instead of spending over $1,200 at a cosmetology or beauty school in order to become certified in that. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And so these are common sense reforms that need to take place. If you look at what Milton Friedman said, and I'm going to nerd out for a second here, bringing up Friedman, occupational licenses were created to hopefully protect public safety and the public good. But what's end up happening is it's just a barrier to entry for people to be able to work. One of my favorite state senators who used to be here is Jeff Brandes, and he filed a bill. He's a big libertarian, and he filed a bill every single year that basically said, let's get rid of all occupational licensing and just require everybody to have insurance. Because to be honest, at the end of the day, all you can do is try to revoke somebody's occupational license if they do something wrong. And then the individual can sue you and hope that they win money in court. But having just insurance and requiring them to have insurance will allow you to continue to have that repercussion and if something does go wrong. But people who aren't getting licensed are just going to continue doing what they're doing unlicensed and hope that they're not going to get in trouble. Instead, the state should just be welcoming them in.
Yeah, occupational licensing is one of these things when you really start to look at it, you recognize the government it operates like a bunch of thugs. They're just running around and shaking people down because they can, right? And as you said, if you have it, certainly if you have an occupational license in one state, there's no reason the other states would not recognize that, except for the fact that it's a huge money grab. That when you come into a new state, you have to pay all these fees and fines, jump through all these hoops, and that goes to people who are either in government or their friends, right?
It's even worse at the local level. I mean, they're now local counties and municipalities are coming up with occupational licensing and occupational licensing fees. Like in Miami-Dade County, for instance, everybody's favorite county to pick on when you think of Florida, there's 20 municipalities within Miami-Dade County alone. And as you look at that, there's painter licenses for almost every single one of them. where you're paying a fee to be a painter. Now, we're talking blocks away from each other. There's no difference in painting in Coral Gables versus painting in Brickell or Miami Gardens or Hialeah. Painting is painting a home. So there's just these out of control regulations that have to get out of the way, that aren't protecting people and are costing citizens real money.
That's absolutely right. They're preventing people from being able to work. We want people to work. We want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps to do the right thing. But in order for that to be a reality that's actually accessible, we have got to get some of these government barriers out of the way. So I think this is a great piece of legislation. Have any other states passed this yet? I know it's been a push for a while to get this universal recognition.
I believe Arizona is one of the other states who has done it. And I think Utah has also done it. There's actually quite a few states. Those are the two that have recently done it. But Florida would become, I think, the 20 other states in this regard. I think there's 20 other states that have some type of universal recognition around licensing.
Okay, so we're moving in a good trajectory then. Well, where I'm not sure we're moving in a good trajectory nationally is on healthcare. You guys are doing a whole bunch of work on this issue. So let's move through a couple of the different angles that you're approaching this from. First, you have the healthcare coverage for nonprofit employee membership organizations. Walk us through what's in that. Who does it help? Why do we need this?
Let's talk about healthcare broadly, right? Like I just nationally right now, the people on the center right are so afraid to talk about healthcare. It's ridiculous. Those on the center right have good ideas around healthcare, but they're so worried and so scared to be labeled as touching Medicaid and Medicare, which is something that you've talked about in the past, these entitlements. They're so worried about, upsetting those who qualify for these type of programs, that they're not willing to talk about the innovation in the healthcare space. The bill that you just mentioned is one of those. A nonprofit organization or association could come together and have members join that organization and then receive healthcare if they want to pay into it. However they want to do it, instead of you having to just get it traditionally from your employer, maybe it's offered cheaper because you can have bigger buying power through a nonprofit organization when it comes to insurance. And so this bill would allow that and make sure that people are going to be able to be set up for success long term with their healthcare outcomes. But what we really need is a personal option. I mean, people have to have personal options in their healthcare. If people haven't had the opportunity, look up direct primary care. It's such a really exciting thing. We've done it in Florida already, but it's something that the Fed should be looking at doing. Where you could basically have healthcare delivered to you in a Netflix subscription type model. Like you can say, hey, I want this. This is going to cost me $80 a month, and that's my healthcare plan. Those are the kind of key innovations that Congress and localities across the country should be adopting.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned direct primary care. I had the privilege of working on this one other time in Tennessee. For people who don't know, direct primary care basically cuts the insurance companies out of the picture. It gets back to the doctor-patient relationship that people used to have. You get back to more of a cash-based service, right? Where when you go in, the prices are listed, you pay this much per month, you get these services for that. And then if you need additional services outside of what the doctor can provide, often they'll negotiate that for you. Let's say you need an MRI or a CAT scan, they'll negotiate those cash-based prices for you. And it ultimately ends up being much cheaper healthcare. And it means that people have more ready access to their doctor. I know here in Atlanta, when I moved here, I had a really hard time getting in to see my doctor, even with insurance, because they don't have that much time. They're all spending their days jumping through these regulatory, paperwork piles that the government has put on them versus getting to actually spend time with patients. And so getting into direct primary care, it cuts out all the insurance. It cuts out a lot of the government regulation because of cutting out the insurance. These are important models that we could see expanded across many states. When you talk about a personal option, though, I think that's something that has been increasingly mentioned in our movement. I don't think people always have a very strong understanding of what's meant by a personal option. So can you dig into the weeds on that a little bit?
So the personal option is our solution to what the left is doing on healthcare in many ways. And hopefully we'll give the right the spine to be able to start talking about healthcare, quite frankly, like we've discussed earlier. And so the keys to the personal option is really focused on supply side reforms. and trying to make sure that individuals have access to things like healthcare savings accounts. They're widely popular, yet only 10% of the overall country currently have or qualify for an HSA. That needs to change. Congress can do that. Senator Rubio has a bill in Congress right now that could change that. And people need to work on doing stuff like that. It's a collection of ideas like certificate of need reform, direct primary care, having the best telehealth laws there are in the country to make sure that people can utilize telehealth options. For instance, in Florida, we have one little piece that we want to get and see as it relates to telehealth. We already believe that Florida has the best telehealth laws in the country, but we have a little piece of, seniors don't want to use video all the time in particular, or those in rural communities who struggle with broadband issues. They want to be able to call their doctor and talk to their doctor about the issues that they're having or the issues that they're facing, and be able to use telehealth through those means. And so that's why we think it's important to make sure that we have audio only options for telehealth, that it's not just video oriented. And so we're working on issues like that. Those are kind of the things that make up the personal option and allow people to have lower cost in their healthcare, better quality, and again, be able to give them more options. That's what they want at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I suspect that most Americans don't really understand why it is that they don't have those options, right? They understand that it doesn't make a lot of sense that you can go see a chiropractor under your insurance, but you can't go see a massage therapist who offer incredible benefits, or why your insurance won't cover things like a gym membership, even though we know working out steadily is something that will lower your healthcare costs over time. A lot of things don't make sense. And I would say that that is mostly due to the insurance companies and people who lobby for them, and other large associations within healthcare who want to protect the status quo, want to limit the options, want to give preferential treatment to the options of the people who they're friends with and cozy with in business. And I'm curious, in trying to move these reforms, who are your biggest opponents, right, to getting this, to making it to where you can call your doctor, which should obviously be allowed. But there's people who are working against this. Who are those people, and why is it so hard to go up against them and get these kind of reforms?
Really the folks that are opposed to those kind of issues are the entrenched bureaucrats, the folks who have constantly believed that we already have the best system. Why do we need to mess it up? Why do we need to keep expanding? People already have options. Why do we need to keep going? It's really a laissez-faire kind of response as it relates to trying to continue to allow healthcare to be innovative and move forward. And so that's the problem that we're seeing as it relates to healthcare. People do not want to innovate. People don't want to remove red tape in the healthcare system because, again, they have their friends. They have their system that's already worked out. Why do we need to go and move their cheese? But the answer is, if we're going to move forward as a society, we're going to have to make some of these key changes. And that's the only way we're going to break up these healthcare monopolies and all of these different issues in the healthcare industry.
Yeah, well, I love the work that you guys are doing on that front. I do agree Florida is ahead of many states when it comes to some of these things. Telehealth is something I've been passionate about for a long time, simply because I don't want to go sit in a waiting room with a bunch of sick people to see my doctor. I think I should be able to call them or jump on a phone call. I'm a millennial, but I've always thought that was crazy. So I'm glad to see you guys making traction on that. There's another thing here that I'm really excited about. Many people who listen to me know I regret going to college. I feel like I was pushed into it. I feel like I had to pay for an expensive degree that I didn't actually need, did not end up working in the field I worked in. And as a whole, I feel like higher education is often a bit of a scam that gets pushed on to people, not always, but at times, and that we really require college degrees for far too many things. So I noticed you guys have a piece of legislation that actually would address some of these issues. It eliminates within the public sector, the need to have a college degree for many jobs, which I'd love to see. I don't think a college degree is needed for half the jobs that ask for it. So explain to us what this looks like.
Look, right now, the state agencies in Florida require you to have a degree for pretty much everything, any job. We've even seen some required by executive assistants. That's a job that's been done for decades without degrees. Those are things that if somebody has prior experience in, they should be able to utilize that experience that they have in the field to be able to get a job. You shouldn't require the first thing on a resume in order to apply for a job within state government to be that you have a 4-year degree. And so we're trying to remove that barrier. It's going to save taxpayers a lot of money if we do, and it's going to provide a ton of opportunity. Look, state agencies are having a hard time getting workers to come work in state agencies. They're not sexy jobs. They're 9 to 5. They're in an office. They're hard as it is. And then we're going to say, hey, you're required to have a 4-year degree to be an executive assistant or, just any of these kind of roles that just absolutely don't need it. And so we want to put people to work. We want to make sure that people can continue to contribute to society in a productive way. And so we're excited about that bill. And again, you're talking about the state of Florida having hundreds of thousands of state employees because of the size of our state. This is going to really change lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, I think so many people will be spared the needless student debt of paying to go to school. I think if you quit if you quit creating a situation where you have to go to college to get basic jobs that require it, that also causes the price of college to go up, right? Because you are inflating demand for these degrees that really isn't necessary in the market. So I think this would impact a lot of lives. I also think it could have really great economic repercussions down the road. It's something that sounds sort of small at first, but when you think about the ripple effect, definitely seems like it could have major impacts for Florida. And hopefully, again, something other people could pay attention to and start championing in their own states.
Hey, let's not give people free college. Let's just give them the opportunity to go get work.
Right. Let's quit making them go to college in the first place. Exactly. Okay. So the next bill I'm stoked on because I am quite the union buster. Do not care for them. I'm fine with a free market situation for unions. If you want to join a union, that should be up to you. And I think it's stupid, but you're free to do it. Sure, go ahead. But what I don't think should exist are public sector unions. I actually think that we should abolish them altogether because I think that is a form of taxpayer funded lobbying, right? Basically, people who work for the government get paid on our taxes. If they then use their time that they're being paid by our taxes or use the money that they're being paid to do those jobs to come in and lobby against the people, you get really bad policies in place and it becomes very difficult for the actual people in an area to push back on that. So I've long been opposed to public sector unions. That's just my own personal stance. I don't know that you go as far as I do, but you do have a bill addressing some issues with public employee unions. I'd love to dig into the weeds on this.
Yeah, look, our bill doesn't do that. I mean, our bill allows unions. In fact, in some cases, we think that it could help the unions thrive because then the unions are going to have to go out and actually recruit members. See, right now, not all unions are representing the people that they're saying that they actually represent. For instance, if you have a collective bargaining unit, say there's 100 teachers in a school district, there's much more, but well, let's just say for easy math, there's 100 people in a collective bargaining unit. Maybe it's a teachers union. And basically right now, the unions aren't representing 50% of those or 60% of those, which would be 60 people. Yet they're negotiating hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars that taxpayers are paying to these students and these institutions. And they're the ones that are getting to negotiate over all of the contracts, the time off, the expenses, what their packages look like. They have free reign over that. While the 40% are not. And so we're saying that, hey, if you are going to represent or say that you represent the teachers, then that's fine, but you should have to prove that at least 60% of the overall bargaining unit wants you to exist and wants to vote on who should be leading that union and be more engaged. And so that's what the bill does. It recertifies folks. And then right now, when you and I have a gym membership, we go to the gym, we give them our credit card, or we have a wire transfer every month to have that expense deducted from our bank account. Well, right now what's happening, and this is only allowed for unions, is the government, the entity is collecting those union dues and then sending the union dues to the union at an expense of 3 to 10% administrative fees to the taxpayers in Florida. And so what we're saying is, hey, we want to protect paychecks and save dollars for the government. And so we're not going to allow you to do that anymore. If you want to do it, that's fine. You can go and give your credit card to the union and they can charge you every month. But we're not going to allow you to continue to waste taxpayer dollars and have a special carve out that nobody else is able to do by having this entrenched opportunity to have government deduct your union dues for you. And so that's what our bill does. And I'm excited. And look, union members could grow from this because it's going to push them to get more membership and to get people more excited to be part of the union.
Well, that's not the direction I want to see it go, but I'll settle for it. No, I think that's very common sense, very sensible. Of course, just a lot of these things, you look at the money being spent and it seems that this should be an easy, no-brainer solution. And what I found is that, while people like me are very opposed to public sector unions, the vast majority of people in our movement are not even as hardline as I am on that. And certainly I have not come across anybody who is opposed to private sector unions. The problem is that it's the element of choice and freedom that needs to be there on the table. And so often it seems that unions are structured in such a way where people sort of automatically get added, automatically get dues taken out, don't really give the individual actors a lot of autonomy. So I think you're right. If people want to be in union, they offer great services and they're beneficial, then they'll easily be able to recruit people. And there's nothing wrong with asking them to do that. But certainly the taxpayers shouldn't be left with that kind of bill to process their fees. So hopefully that gets through. Now, your next piece is a big one. This is something I've heard mentioned a few times in the past. It's a growing concept that a few states are tackling. It's called a regulatory sandbox bill. Give us the ins and outs of what this looks like to play in the sandbox.
This is crazy. You can come in an area in Florida and not have any regulations. You can open up shop tomorrow in an innovative way without any regulations in an area. I know it's a crazy concept, but our goal and what we've seen in Utah is that it works. Shocking. Businesses want to come where there's not a ton of regulations. It's mind-blowing to us that people have not been able to figure this out. And so what we're doing is trying to push through a bill that would allow that to take place throughout the state of Florida. So that way people have the opportunity to continue to thrive and continue to contribute to Florida's economy, and entrepreneurship is going to grow in Florida once this bill's passed.
Man, Lee on your team has been trying to lure me down to Florida for some time, and that just might do it because I run two businesses, and what I go through behind the scenes, regulatory wise, even as an anti-government person who was opposed to regulations before I got into business for myself, I have been absolutely floored by the amount of time I have to spend jumping through hoops, the amount of research I have to do just to make sure I'm within the legal framework, all the filing. It is absurd, the burden that we place on people who are simply just trying to offer a gooder service that would benefit people around them. So I like that a lot. I'm going to try to bring this up in Georgia because that sounds like a nice place I'd like to play.
Hey, and it's nice and warm. We don't have snow like Atlanta does.
Yeah. I've only gotten hit with snow once since moving here in my 2 years, and I'm having a very warm winter right now. So recruitment's not been going as well in Lee's part this year, but last winter he about had me. You guys are hot on the tail of a tort reform bill, which can you first explain to my audience what is tort reform for those who've not worked around this issue? And then secondarily, help us understand what your bill specifically does.
Well, look, if you've ever been through Florida, you know that there are a ton of attorneys advertising on billboards all across the state. If you're injured or hurt in any way, shape, or form, call me. I'm the best there is. I'll make sure that you can get anything that you need and just compensation for your injuries. All you got to do is call me. And by the way, you don't have to pay a dime because unless you get paid, I don't get paid. And so it's really the scheme that's been set up by the big trial lawyers to be able to say and incentivize people to sue for almost anything. If they feel like they're wrongfully hit or injured or whatever it may be, it's really incentivizing these trial attorneys and people to go to these trial attorneys to be able to sue their insurance companies, to be able to insure other individuals or sue other individuals. And so we have this crazy legal market in Florida, which is driving up costs exponentially. If you look at how much tort cost each individual family per year, it's almost $1,000. Every family, I shouldn't say family, every individual. So if you have a family of four, you're paying about $4,000 a year in tort taxes. Now, it's not coming straight from you. You're paying for it in your insurance. Your insurance bills are going through the roof here in Florida, and it's a massive issue. Yes, we get hurricanes. So does Georgia. So does Texas. So does Louisiana. And they don't have the issues that we do as it relates to insurance because of the fact that we have a terrible legal system set up in Florida. And it's time that we change that and get it under control.
I'd love to see that. This is something I've actually talked about a good bit, but America's legal system at large is off the charts. I mean, we are such a litigious society. We have such poor standards for who can bring a lawsuit, what kind of standing or proof of evidence you have to have of actual harm. And it is something that bleeds people dry. And it's very expensive to be a business owner. As you mentioned, it makes insurance much more expensive. And I think it leads to a society where we're also sort of at each other's throats. Everybody's kind of looking for a gotcha that they can sue over. So I love to see tort reform come up. I think it's very important. It's one of these issues sort of beneath the scenes where if you're not in a legal field, you're probably not aware of how much it impacts you, but boy, does it. And it's something that I think is desperately needed.
You're telling me Hollywood's not talking about this sexy issue? I mean, come on. Everybody should be talking about tort reform.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like a lot of the issues I work on, people, they at first sound really dry, and then you dig into them and they do a double take, like, wait, what's happening? We did an event here in Georgia about certificate of need recently. And I was sort of unpacking what this looks like. And afterwards, the bartender came up to me and he was shook, right? He was like, I just overheard your event and what's happening? This is going on here. And so I think it is one of those things where politics at times can feel a little bit dry or wonky, but actually when you unpack the different policies and you understand how they're playing out and sort of how everything starts to fit together, it is sort of exciting to recognize like, oh, this is the root cause of the problem. And this is what we can actually do about it. And what we can do about it is not this like hardcore partisan thing, right? It's a very common sense solution that both the left and right should be able to come together on. And I love those kinds of issues.
That's the beauty of the states, right? The laboratories for democracy. You see party crossover much more than you do in DC, and I wish more people would get to see the opportunity of what goes on within state government so they can realize democracy, the republic that we have set up, is working. Like, quite frankly, it's working. It should be hard to do things at the federal level. That's how the founders set it up. It should be easier and more comprehensive at the state level. Well, guess what? That's what's happening. And so we need folks to be involved at the state level to see what's going on and to see all the sausage being made, because to be quite frank, that's where most of the decisions should be made and where they're actually being made. And, it's sexy issues like tort reform that more people should care about.
Preach. I agree wholeheartedly. And this is one reason I don't get too downtrodden working in politics, because most of my work has always been at the state level and we get incredible wins at the state level. And even if it takes a couple of years, we tend over time to be able to win out in the battle of ideas. And so all of these things are exciting. I know a lot of my audience will like to dig in more. If people want to get involved with AFP in Florida or just in general, how do you think is the best way they can make a difference? How can they best plug in with AFP? What would be your marching orders for people?
Go to americansforprosperity.org. But I know a lot of folks are tired of using websites. Unlike me, I still go to websites. I'm old school, I guess, at this point. But look, we're on every social media channel there is. If you want to go to Americans for Prosperity or type in Americans for Prosperity and your state on any of your social media channels, and you can find out specifically what each state is doing on their social media channels. And so that's the best way to be in touch with us. And then we'll get you connected, message us there, and we'll get you connected to a local engagement director. And our engagement directors are really those who are helping bring our grassroots folks in to be able to tell them how they can make a difference. Hey, here's how you contact a legislator. Here's how you have the most impact. You want to set up a group and you want to have events? Here, let us help you understand what it takes in order to be able to achieve movements in your local community to be able to make a difference.
That's probably my favorite part about what you guys do. And when I've worked around the left, which I have done mostly due to my criminal justice reform work, they have entire departments that are called organizing departments, right? They'll have vice presidents and directors of organizing. And this is something that is very deeply entrenched in left-wing politics that is simply not done that much on the right, except for within AFP. You guys are so good about finding the grassroots people who are impacted, finding people who are activists and who want to make a difference, and then actually organizing and finding, a plan of which we can actually start plugging in people and using their skills and talents to help move the needle. So guys, definitely plug in with AFP if you want to get involved. They do all kinds of cool stuff. They have Days at the Hill, they have events, they can help you contact your lawmakers, they can help you learn how to start lobbying on your own behalf. They can help you start doing other, educational efforts like placing op-eds or writing letters to the editor. There's so much good work going on. It's a really good way to actually get involved in your state. If you're listening to this and you're in Florida, listen, we just laid out a ton of issues. I'm sure there's something in there you could find that you'd like to get involved in. But if you're listening to another state, like we said, there's 36 other AFP chapters. I work with several of them, and there's also an AFP national organization. So it's a really good group to follow if you want to stay informed and if you want to get active. And also, Skylar, they can follow you. You're an excellent resource. What are your handles?
At Skylar Zander, SkylarZander. Just look me up on Twitter or Facebook.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate your time, appreciate all that you're doing down there. As I always say, it's so good to know that there's people like you out there fighting. It makes me feel encouraged. So appreciate you taking the time, and best of luck on all these issues.
Hannah, thank you so much.